Hello and welcome to the Play-by-Play, a sports media talk show from Awful Announcing. Or I don't think we're live.
Oh, that was weird.
That's weird. All right, I'm gonna go again.
All right.
Hello and welcome to the Play-by-Play, a sports media talk show from Awful Announcing. I am your host, Drew Lerner, today joined by our guy, staff writer, Brendan Clean. How are you doing today, Brendan?
I'm great. The NBA is back. That makes me very happy. But we, of course, got some news because sports media is insane. So we will not be talking NBA today, but I'm excited nonetheless.
Right. I think we've done our fair share of NBA in the last week or so. We'll have plenty of time to cover those storylines the rest of the year. But today, October 29th, we're coming live to you at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. We're going to talk a bit about the breaking news yesterday out of the Athletics' Andrew Marchand. Andrew reported Tuesday morning that Scott Van Pelt, ESPN's flagship late night sports center host, is in the running to replace Around the Horn in the 5 p.m. Eastern Time window on the network. Brendan, I just want to get your top line takeaways here. To me, this kind of makes a lot of sense.
It makes sense. Scott Van Pelt is one of the signature talents at ESPN. He is versatile. He's done all of the types of things you could do at ESPN and before. Nothing about this surprises me. As a viewer, as a consumer, as a fan of Scott Van Pelt and of a lot of ESPN's content, I want more Van Pelt than this would allow. Like, I read these details and it's like, giving up most nights of SportsCenter, iffy on Monday Night Countdown. Like, okay, I'm only getting half an hour of Scott Van Pelt now. I used to get like 4 some nights. So that part is where I got a little scared, to be honest with you. I was suddenly rooting against it, even though it would be a very cool opportunity for a guy that I think pretty highly of.
Yeah, let's make it clear. You're one of the lucky ones on the West Coast here, so you don't have to wait up until 11 p.m. at the earliest to see Scott Van Pelt every night. But I actually had a similar takeaway. Like, when I was reading the details, it seems like he'd cut back substantially on the late night sports centers, but, keeping to the, schedule where he's on after the most important games on ESPN. And then, perhaps cutting the Monday Night Countdown job, which would kind of make sense. If you're already doing an evening show, it's going to be hard for you to do that show and then also do Monday Night Countdown immediately after.
Yep.
So, yeah, I think if this did happen, you're right. Like, we might be seeing less of Van Pelt overall, but maybe that's what he wants. I mean, Burke Magnus even mentioned, I think, to Andrew Marchand in an interview that, doing a late night sports center like that, especially, Van Pelt's doing his show from DC. This is like late night for him and his staff. It's not really sustainable for a lot of people to do that long term. He's been doing it for over 10 years now. Maybe it's time for a change. And to me, like, it makes a lot of sense. Pardon the Interruption is already produced out of that same DC studio. There would be some synergies there, I'm sure. And I think there's a lot of formats in that half-hour time slot that would actually really be suitable for SVP's skill set. I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on, like, what do you think a 5 p.m. happy hour show that's just a half hour would look like if SVP were running it?
I have to admit, my imagination is kind of limited on this because I'm so programmed into thinking about these types of half-hour shows and the kind of gamified, very format-driven world that they've been for my whole life, basically, with, Pardon the Interruption and Around the Horn. Like, that feels like, well, that's what a half-hour show on ESPN is. I don't even know what else it could be, right? Like, we saw A similar thing with Max Kellerman as he was leaving First Take. I think it was called This Just In. I don't remember if it was a half hour or an hour long, but it just felt like SportsCenter in a different iteration that happened to be hosted by Max Kellerman, who probably thought himself too good to be hosting SportsCenter, right? Like that was kind of what it was, and I don't want that. I would like that. That doesn't feel better to me as a future for Van Pelt or ESPN or anything. If it's just a shortened, condensed version of SportsCenter where Van Pelt is just doing interviews and doing one big thing and doing bad beats and then getting out of there. Like it sounds like you might have an idea that it could sell me, but I just worry that it's going to become a shorter version of what he's already doing at a different day part that probably has less eyeballs on it. And again, that makes me a little worried. But what do you think?
Yeah, I don't think this is what that show would look like. I think with the half-hour time constraint, you're forced to get a little bit creative. And if I had to create an analog for what I think SVP's new show would look like in this time slot, I think if you take PTI's 5 Good Minutes segment and essentially apply that to a whole show, like maybe SVP does 1 or 2 kind of more in-depth interviews with an expert on whatever the topic of the day is. You bring in your NBA analyst, you bring in your college football analyst, whatever, and you really dive deep into the stories of the day in that sport. I think that's kind of how ESPN would envision this show. Make it more podcast than typical SportsCenter show. Because if they wanted to just have SportsCenter, I mean, that's what is already in the window now that has replaced Around the Horn. Like they could just continue that, but I don't think that's what you bring SVP in to do. I think you bring him in to be a star, to really drive, the show itself. You're not just doing this as like a replacement programming for SportsCenter. You want it to be unique and stand on its own legs.
I feel that, and I'm sure there's a version that could really work. I just also, the aspect that you would lose isn't, I mentioned like some of the go-to segments that he has, the bad beats or the one big thing or whatever, but to me it's also, I think Van Pelt has been able to turn that show being the go-to post-game, effectively the post-game show for all of the big games throughout the year, into something that really cuts through and matters, even with people like yourself being asleep during it. You'll see it on Instagram or YouTube, right? Still, because he does such a great job with it and really does the homework and really earns the trust. He has pushed to make that show a traveling on-site thing, a fixture, in a way that, it's easy on Monday Night Football because now he does Countdown, but like they were at the finals last year. They've done other events, and he is a big part of why. So part of me wonders, like, could you port that? Like, could this 5 p.m. show move? Could it be on site at certain places? I mean, it's kind of expensive to do a half-hour show remotely, but if it's the same production people that might do something else, it's not crazy to think you could do that. Like, I want to bring as much of what makes Van Pelt great to that show as possible before I'm sold on it. And I bet that they can do it, but I've just never really seen it work. So right. I don't know.
It's important to reiterate, like, this is not confirmed. We've just learned that SVP is a strong possibility, was the words that Andrew Marchand used in his report.
And as you mentioned, confirmed by Burke Magnus that this is the case, right? Like,
yes.
That's
so definitely
rare.
A front runner. I want to get to another interesting aspect of this report, which is that Magnus himself actually tried to lure Ryan Russillo back to ESPN as part of this move and pair him up again with Scott Van Pelt years after they had their run on ESPN radio. And I believe that show was probably simulcast on ESPN or ESPN2 at the time.
And they would go to game day sites every week. It was very much a popular fixture for them. Yeah.
Yes. So, I mean, of course, Ryan Russillo left the Ringer and ended up at a new venture sponsored by Barstool. So
Yep.
did not happen. But what did you think of Russillo kind of getting the offer from ESPN to link back up with SVP and foregoing that to do his own thing?
Without knowing the full details of what the offer was, what it would have looked like, I would imagine that if you were pursuing Ryan Russillo in 2025 and you're Burke Magnus, you are coming to him with the opportunity to do a podcast or some kind of digital show or radio show as well. I doubt that it would have made any sense for either side to bring him on to just be part of this half-hour thing, but I don't know. With that said, it feels like a sign of the times to have somebody say no to a TV show and go to a digital first kind of independent streak outlet like Barstool over having a TV show on ESPN, right? Like for a while, Barstool's biggest moment in history was losing its half-hour TV show on ESPN, and now it's luring talent to go be part of it rather than having that exact thing. So I think that is a fascinating just example of where we're at, assuming that some of the other details of the offers would have been relatively similar. Obviously, we know Russillo wanted to build his own thing and beyond maybe just his show, and perhaps that's another example of why the sign of the times is the sign of the times, is that you have the freedom to do something like that at Barstool rather than doing it at ESPN. But I also just think, look, like, you know, for anyone who knows the Russillo lore or listens to his show or has really ever heard an interview with him or anything, he was under that shadow for long enough, the Scott Van Pelt shadow. And I just think that coming back, it wouldn't have felt like a move forward for him to circle back to being once again in Scott Van Pelt's shadow. So it probably just didn't make sense, but I do like that ESPN is thinking creatively and understood what a hit it had on its hands when they had those two together and isn't afraid to reapproach departed talent or think creatively or, you know, like you said, even kind of recreate a podcast feel on its television airwaves. I think all of the ESPN strategy part of this makes sense, but it probably was just a shot in the dark that wasn't really going to work out.
Yeah. You know, I think it was maybe last year where ESPN took a shot at the dark at Colin Cowherd, trying to bring him back from Fox before he re-signed. So they're clearly open to it. I think the Russillo SVP show, if it had happened, would have been pretty interesting because both of them have raised their profiles individually so much since having that show together. It would be an interesting dynamic to see if they would kind of fall back into how, you know, the rhythms of their old show, or if it would have been completely different. I kind of sense that it would have been pretty different in 2025. But another interesting detail here, that this story was full of nuggets. Aside from Scott Van Pelt being the front runner for the 5 p.m. show, Marchand also included Peter Schrager and Brian Windhorst as other possibilities for that 5 p.m. slot, and also floated that these could be possible personalities to fill ESPN's 2 p.m. slot, which would lead directly out of the Pat McAfee show. That's currently an hour of Sports Center before getting into NBA Today, NFL Live, etc. So what do you think of those two being mentioned as possible, you know, personalities that could have their own show at ESPN?
I think this is the part of the report that is the densest for what the future of ESPN will kind of be in a few different ways. So if we just kind of include the Van Pelt side of this and Schrager and Windhorst, which Schrager had already been in the rumor mill around this 5 p.m. slot previously. That had been out there. Windhorst and Van Pelt are kind of new, but all three of them together, Drew, it tells me, like, do you think ESPN is kind of hearing the where did the journalism go conversation? Because that was a big connective tissue that jumped out to me immediately. Those three guys are reporters first and foremost, and would bring an air of respectability and traditional ESPN outside the lines, whatever type of a vibe back to ESPN's TV daytime slot. Did it jump out to you that way?
I hadn't really thought of that. I thought of it more in, NBA or NFL centric terms when I saw Schrager or Windhorst. But I think you're onto something there because, I mean, God knows, like, if you listened to the show last week, I took ESPN to task a little bit over how they handled the NBA gambling situation. And I think they have lost a lot of their ability to kind of have real reporters doing real news on their airwaves. You could only imagine what would have looked different that day if, Scott Van Pelt had been around the office, ready to, just hop in an anchor chair and host breaking news coverage. And I think, and
unfortunately, Windhorst did step in it on that one as well. So, not a great time to be him being brought up in this conversation, but he has a pretty good reputation, and I think these three all are strong reporters.
Yeah, I do tend to think, though, like a Schrager show or even a Windhorst show, which I think is pretty unlikely, to be honest, but I think Schrager's got real legs. I think it would still be more of a personality-driven show. We've seen Peter Schrager co-host or guest host, Pat McAfee. We've seen him, I believe, guest host either Get Up or First Take at one point.
I think both. Yep.
Yeah. So, like, I think that's kind of, he's getting his reps in there, and he has the type of personality that could lead a show that wouldn't necessarily have to be hard news or be more opinion fair like the rest of the ESPN daytime lineup. But because of his background, he might lend a little bit more credence to that side of things. And I think maybe ESPN wants that perception back just a little bit more.
For sure. But I mean, look, every show is a personality show. Every TV show that's ever been made is a personality show. So I don't think that I don't think those two things are mutually exclusive. I think it's what are you trying to achieve with the show, right? Scott Van Pelt is a personality. People know what they're getting when they tune in to that 11 p.m. Sports Center. But what he is trying to achieve with that show is a measure of focus on the athletic achievements that he's covering from that day, a respect and kind of grace toward the subjects, the athletes and coaches that he covers, and a celebratory kind of feel, right? Like that's what Scott Van Pelt is. That is the personality you're tuning into. I think that I see these three guys as fairly in that vein, and I think that it would bring a different type of feel and a different type of energy and a different probably focus on what's being covered than these other, First Take or the Pat McAfee show potentially, maybe most specifically would. And I think that would be a good thing for them. The other part, though, that I feel like you kind of hit, the personality, the star-centered, that's another thing ESPN's definitely moving toward. But I think, what both of these reports tell me, Drew, that also kind of offers a vision of the future for ESPN is that is coming more and more, almost with every move that they make, at the expense of SportsCenter. And that's been a trend forever. I mean, we don't need to talk about that. SportsCenter is not on as often as it used to be. Everybody knows that. But I just wonder, they still have these extravagantly expensive shows, studios, I should say, where they air SportsCenter. They shut down the LA one, but obviously in Bristol, there's still a lot of investment. There's still some personalities that cut through on that side of things, right? Shea Cornette just got promoted to be part of First Take from SportsCenter. Al Duncan is a big personality. Kevin Nagandi is a big personality. I'm sure I'm forgetting others. And with the new launch of the ESPN app, Bob Iger himself, he kept referencing the kind of AI customizable features where, there can be a feed of content from SportsCenter to offer you the news and analysis in compact format to go along with the highlights or the scores or the news about your favorite teams and players. It's still a core part of what ESPN wants to be, and yet it's the thing that's just on at sports bars at this point, right? Like, I don't think it's not appointment viewing. It's not even like noticeable viewing. It just kind of on. And so I wonder, like, where does it fit? How do they put it out? What does it look like anymore? And I don't have an answer. I don't think that this piece of news that we're covering here really gave us that answer, but this looks like it could potentially be half hour to 90 minutes of SportsCenter cut out of it had already been carved out. So I don't know.
Here's like my perspective on this. If you think of like, let's imagine that they took 2 p.m., they gave Peter Schrager a show, and then they took the 5 p.m. and they put it into Scott Van Pelt's hands, right? That's 90 minutes of SportsCenter cut out of the lineup. But if you think about like when would people want to watch SportsCenter the most, we're talking about people before they go to work, or before they're going to school early in the morning, which that's going to be untouched. And we're thinking about after the games that are played at night. So that late night SportsCenter, I'm sure someone would fill the seat for Van Pelt. Having a midday SportsCenter, in today's day and age doesn't really seem to make a lot of sense. Like, you're probably better off having a show that's going to generate social media engagement, be clippable, that type of thing. And SportsCenter is not. And I think ESPN is probably looking at that and saying, we're kind of wasting an hour of programming in the middle of the day where we could have something else that is going to be, a bigger hit on social media. And if I were an executive in Bristol, I mean, that's how I would be thinking. So I wouldn't be shocked if that's, if the daytime sports centers go the way of the dodo, but I think there's, logic behind the move. And I don't know if it necessarily even means that ESPN is kind of taking a step back from its like core competencies or its, core purpose, but it's just kind of the reality of what like being a linear TV channel is in 2025.
Yeah, and I know we're about to get to our hot mics. The last thing I would say is if you talk about SportsCenter, people have also noted that what SportsCenter is and feels like from a view to watch these days also feels a lot like Get Up, and so it's news highlights, and then it's Mina Kimes talking football for 4 minutes, and then Tim Legler talking NBA for 4 minutes, commercial. And it's like, well, that's Get Up already. So, I think both things are becoming the same thing. And so it doesn't make sense to necessarily have both going on. Maybe just lean all the way into the thing that obviously breaks through the best.
Right. One more nugget before we get to our hot mics. I wanted to mention this because I found it interesting as a bit of a ratings nerd. Burke Magnus actually revealed to Andrew Marchand in this report that SportsCenter had been outrating Around the Horn by a pretty substantial margin year over year. That 5 p.m. SportsCenter is averaging 448,000 viewers, while a year ago Around the Horn was averaging 386,000 viewers during the time slot. So, ESPN is probably, there's a reason they're being patient here, right? Like, the move actually paid off from a ratings perspective.
And it's cheaper probably, right? Yeah. Like it's shot out of Bristol. It's talent that was already on the roster. It's not all these weird Bill Plaschkes and whatever that were just sort of dangling there. So, that's why they're in no rush.
Yep. All right, Brendan, I know you have a hot mic prepared for us. I wanted to talk a bit about the the Major League Baseball pregame show on Fox. So why don't you tell us what you got prepared there?
Yeah, the hot mics are something that we just kind of don't have a full segment on, but just want to shout out, pan, praise, whatever it might be. And in this case, I think it's a little bit in the middle, more pan than praise. And I don't think that should come as a huge surprise to a lot of people. That show has been, it's full of personalities that people have strong opinions about, let's say. It's like the top NFL play-by-play announcer doing studio hosting. It's two of the most love them or hate them MLB players ever, and Derek Jeter and Alex Rodriguez, who we didn't even know if they liked each other before they started doing this thing together, and then David Ortiz kind of doing his thing. But I don't know what you think. We didn't really talk about it. It's like, not for a lack of trying. I actually have been impressed with how much I feel like Jeter and A-Rod and Big Papi actually are into it. Like, you can tell that they're prepared, that they're, they're not taking days off. They're not, like they're doing the show. Despite A-Rod owning the Timberwolves and Derek Jeter doing whatever and Big Papi going viral for all sorts of shenanigans that he does, not even in this country, back home for him. Like, whatever. They're still here and they're working hard and they're trying to do it. It just is a reminder, I feel like, that, big stars don't make a good show, and they just don't have chemistry. They do not have chemistry at all, in my opinion. Like, they are so, between the Kevin Burkhardt fake laughing and the, Derek Jeter and A-Rod trying to outcompete to be the most stodgy, stick up their ass possible person that they can, and then Big Papi trying to kind of do he's trying to do a Charles Barkley, Shaquille O'Neal, whoever you want to fill in kind of shtick, and it works sometimes, it doesn't work others, but you can't force that stuff either, right? Like, that has to be natural, and just none of it is natural. There are good moments. There are like, I thought the Vladimir Guerrero Jr., they got some decent stuff out of him, and they've had some different things that have been good, but for the most part, it just feels so forced, and it's crazy to think that those three people on air together, and I don't even want to tune in. I don't even care. It doesn't even catch my attention.
Yeah, no, it's actually that's pretty much exactly what I was going to say. Like, I've largely tuned it out. It's just been kind of background noise. And it's like, when you think about other studio shows in this ilk, like if we're thinking about Turner's hockey show when Wayne Gretzky's on there, or if we're talking about, NBC's NBA segments with Michael Jordan, like, when those people are speaking, I'm like, actually, like, I'm leaning forward. I'm on the edge of my seat. Like, I want to hear what they're talking about. But you know what? We're 4 games into the World Series now, and I can't even remember a segment that I would recall or talk about with my friends from the MLB show. And you bringing that up is kind of eye opening to me, because not only do they have just one star, they have 3 of the biggest modern day baseball stars on there.
Everybody knows all 3 of those guys by face, name, and story. And yet they don't even pop at all on social, on YouTube, nothing.
It's really interesting. And wow, like, Kevin Burkhardt gets to hang out with those 3 guys and Tom Brady, but like, they're all kind of, I think, maybe this is mean, but like milquetoast at best. Like, even like the Brady booth has gotten better, but like, I don't know, like these are 4 like superstars, mega stars in the world of sports, and like we're not talking about them that much.
It's that's Fox's kind of model too, right? Like, that's the direction they're going. And yet with baseball, I just think it's different, especially with how passionate, and at this point, it's not niche, but you have to have people who are paying attention for 162 games in order to get the fans to feel the size of the moment when they do tune in, right? And like, I just look at Fox's talent roster, and they have cross paths with or actively employed 3 of the people that I think are actually the best at that right now, and Adam Wainwright, AJ Pierzynski, and Vinny Pasquantino, who's been doing some hits on FS1 for them. All 3 of those guys, when I watch them, I actually do want to watch more. Like, I do kind of seek it out. When Wainwright's on The Herd or First Things First or a podcast, like, I'm like, okay, damn, like, I'm curious. He's smart. I want to hear. And it's just funny to have that direct contrast at one network, and then you tune in for the World Series and you're like, oh, I'm falling asleep.
Yeah, no, that is strange. And I will say, I'll give credit to the lead booth to Joe Davis and Smoltz.
They're great.
I've enjoyed them a lot this series. I think they've really brought their A game. And, I know people like to complain about Smoltz, but I don't know. I like him. So
I like him too. I feel like Davis brings a little less sourpussness to Smoltz in a way. 100%. That's good. I like them.
Yeah. All right, real quick before we head out, I'm going to plug a major feature that is going to be dropping on awfulannouncing.com tomorrow, courtesy of our guy, Brendan Clean. We will be releasing the podcast Power Rankings, 2nd annual, Brendan. Do you want to tease this at all? Any little nuggets that you want to drop for the people? I mean, this caused a lot of lot of reaction last year. So I'm very excited to see what happens tomorrow.
Well, I want to say it's not a ranking. We call it a list, but it's loosely ranked. The cluster at the top is highlighted for a reason. But yeah, it's cool. It's been fun to put together. We have more content for it this year than last year, and it's basically just like who matters in sports podcasting right now. And the cool thing about it, I feel like in 2025 is what even is a podcast? Like, what does that mean, and what will it mean, and where is this going? And that's kind of the fun part. So we have some people that are in different segments and sectors of that than we did last year, where it was still feeling even just a year ago more like a show on your feed. You click, you watch, you listen, and that's it. And now, the Ringer Netflix deal we talked about here last week or the week before, some of that stuff is changing things as we speak. So I'm sure I was figuring, unless there's crazy news, we might just talk sports podcasting on the play-by-play tomorrow. So there'll be more where that came from. But yes, go to awfulannouncing.com, go to all of our social channels to see where your favorites are on the list, or if they made it and what they said. We also got some answers from these folks about how they see the industry. So that'll be fun too.
Yes, very excited for that tomorrow. Definitely check it out. But that'll do it for today's episode of the Play-by-Play. We will be back live tomorrow, Thursday afternoon, likely talking about that list, perhaps talking about some other stories as they come up. But thank you again for listening. Please like, subscribe, tell a friend about the Play-by-Play, and we will continue knocking these out 3 times a week for y'all. So we will see you guys tomorrow.